Guilty on all counts. A judge in the murder trial of Jose Ibarra in Georgia over the killing of nursing student Laken Riley just came down with that verdict moments ago. Let's take you inside the courtroom when that verdict was read. Take a listen.
I'll now announce the verdict. In the state of Georgia versus Jose Antonio Ibarra, case SU 24CR0323, count 1, malice murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 2, felony murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 3, felony murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 4, felony murder. I find the defendant guilty. Count 5, kidnapping with bodily injury. I find the defendant guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault with intent to rape. I find the defendant guilty. Count 7, aggravated battery. I find the defendant guilty. Count 8, obstructing or hindering a 911 call. I find the defendant guilty. Count 9, tampering with evidence. I find the defendant guilty. Count 10, peeping Tom. I find the defendant guilty. I certainly will allow both sides to look at this if you want to do it. The next step is sentencing. I'm prepared to go forward with that now, or if either side suggests that you need a few minutes, an hour break or something to do that, then I'll certainly do that as well. Consider that.
CBS News correspondent Manuel Bojorquez joins us live outside that Georgia courtroom. Manny, the judge says he's ready to move forward with sentencing. Should we find that out later on today?
We could very well find out the sentence later today after the lunch break. He's wasting no time in this case, and he wasted no time coming back with that verdict. It was really just about 15 to 20 minutes after the closing arguments that he came back and said that he was finding Jose Ibarra guilty on all counts. Again, this really came down to the evidence. The judge said there was overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution here that he was Laken Riley's killer, including that DNA evidence found underneath her fingernails. His DNA, according to the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, which places him at the scene of the crime, and they say in the struggle that happened, which led to her death. The defense's argument that they may have the wrong person because he has a brother who may have been in the area as well really did not resonate with the judge at all. He said that overwhelming evidence really is what this all came down to. And the sentence here, the max sentence, could be life in prison without the possibility of parole. We could find out this afternoon if indeed that's what the judge is going to hand down.
And Manny, yesterday we were all waiting for the brothers or the brother of Jose Ibarra to take the stand, but that didn't happen. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, those brothers are also in custody. They have immigration court cases that are going on right now. And Diego Ibarra, the brother in question, according to the defense, really, his attorney did not want him to have to get on the stand and testify because he thought it could impact his immigration case. The defense, I guess, decided to just back down from having the brothers testify, and they decided to just wrap up their arguments then.
And the prosecution has said that, this really came down to really good police work, and they got lucky with some surveillance footage of an individual wearing that Adidas hat. Can you walk us through kind of what they were able to find in terms of evidence when it came to that surveillance video?
Right. They pointed out, of course, the DNA evidence, but of course, a lot of video evidence, including in the morning of the murder. The man, they said, was Jose Ibarra lurking around some student housing. That's where the peeping Tom charge came from. There was a student who said he was trying to peep inside and try to get inside her door. There was video of him, according to the prosecution, near that jogging trail where Laken Riley was jogging when she was attacked. attacked. Then there was video of a man seen throwing away a jacket into a dumpster near the place where Ibarra lived. They say that jacket contained both his DNA and the hairs, the DNA of Laken Riley, linking him to the attack.
And one of the more heartbreaking aspects of this trial, Manny, was the fact that Laken Riley's family was present through these entire proceedings. They were there as the verdict was read. Can you give us a look at their reaction to all of this?
Yeah, there was actually sobbing in the courtroom. You could hear when he announced the guilty verdict on the first charge of malice murder. And there has been sobbing throughout this case. It's been incredibly difficult for the family of Laken Riley and her friends who have decided to sit in the courtroom to hear all the evidence against him, to hear about how she was beaten, the attempted rape that the prosecution said happened, that the judge agreed and issued a guilty verdict on as well. So it has been very difficult. In fact, her mother sobbed at one point when the prosecution had an officer read the last text message that she ever sent, and that was to her mother saying, "I'm going to go on a run, and if you're available, let's have a phone call." They weren't able ever to link up because then the attack happened, and they just recounted how her mother kept texting and calling, trying to get a hold of her, saying, "I'm worried sick over you, what's going on?" But she would never hear from her again.
Yeah, that was so heartbreaking to hear, Manny. And you know, you're in the community of Athens, Georgia, and the entire country has really been watching to see the results of this verdict. Can you give us some sense of what the impact of this trial has had on not only the community there, but the state of Georgia?
Well, in some ways, and you know from covering the campaign, that her name was brought up over and over, especially by now President-elect Trump, when it comes to the issue of border security, because of course Jose Ibarra entered the country illegally back in 2022. So this case has really had an impact, if you want to frame it that way, on the political side of things. But for the community here, you know, there was just such fear about the fact that something like this could happen, that a student could just go out for a run and that she could be attacked and then killed. But you get a sense listening to her roommates and her friends here that maybe they feel now that justice has been served, that they can let her memory now rest in peace. We're still waiting to hear what the sentence will be, so the family will still likely be in the courtroom for that. But again, just emotional days for them listening to all that testimony.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to see. All right, CBS News correspondent Manuel Bojorquez in Athens, Georgia for us. Thanks so much for that reporting, Manny. All right, let's get right to CBS News legal analyst Jessica Levinson. Jessica, that verdict coming down, guilty on all counts. Did that surprise you at all?
It didn't, given the conversation you just had about the evidence here. And the evidence was pretty overwhelming. And we know that this was a bench trial, that the defendant now, who's been convicted, had waived his right to a jury trial. A judge was able to look just at the facts that were presented. And again, really difficult to overcome all of that evidence, the DNA evidence, the hair, and then the other evidence that you talked about linking him to this heinous crime. Now, when it comes to bench trials, they tend to be quicker and we get a verdict quicker because it's not about trying to explain to the jury what the law is or ramping up the situation. It's just going straight to somebody who's learned in the law and who knows full well what is enough for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I have a feeling this case went to trial because there just was no offer on the table that made any sense. And that's when you see cases that are very strong go to trial. It's because people decide to take their chances. And again, there's no offer from the prosecution that makes any sense other than, okay, well, let's take our chances with a trial.
Yeah, and you mentioned that he waived his right to a jury trial. What was the strategy by the defense at that point to waive that right?
So I can't look into the defense's mind, but my guess is it's based in part on the conversation you just had about how this case became part of our public debate about immigration, about criminal justice. This is a case that is not only tragic, but it was elevated to a discussion in our presidential election. And obviously there are hugely high emotions attached to this case and to the fact that The defendant entered this country illegally, was somebody who should not have been let free. And I think because of all of the emotions surrounding the case, and because you can imagine a jury would look at the defendant and who he was, and have preconceived notions. I think that was the defense's strategy, essentially, is go to a judge who's not going to be swayed by emotions, but will be looking just at the facts and the law. Now, of course, the facts were against him, but I think the calculus was, this is a case that we're talking about in the news that evokes obviously very strong emotional reactions, not just based on what happened, but who the defendant is.
And the judge said he's ready to proceed with sentencing right then and there. So we could learn his fate later on today. Jessica, how unusual is it for a judge to not only give the sentencing, but also move right into, give the verdict, but then also move into sentencing? How unusual is that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think the answer is, in bench trials, it's really up to the judge as to how quickly they are ready to proceed. They don't have to review what the jury said and if there's a split verdict. This is a judge who's been thinking about this case for a long time. This is a judge who has obviously sentenced people before and knows all of the sentencing guidelines and rules that are in place. And so I think it makes sense that there would not be a delay. I mean, in some cases, in some states, you have the requirement that victims be able to come forward with victim impact statements, and that sometimes delays things. In this case, I think what we see is a judge who has been living and breathing this case for quite a while. And again, no reason to have to go back to chambers for a few weeks and think about what the appropriate sentence is. I will say, it's always dangerous to get into the business of predictions, but given the verdict and the speed with which the verdicts came and the crimes at issue, I would be very surprised if the sentence includes any possibility of the defendant being able to see the light of day again.
CBS News legal analyst Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for that insight.